Have you ever wondered if there's more to our senses than what we currently comprehend? This intriguing question sets the stage for a journey into the realm of extrasensory perception, commonly known as ESP. It's a territory that ventures beyond the five senses we're familiar with: sight, hearing, taste, touch, and smell. Instead, it delves into the potential for a sixth sense, a perception that transcends the ordinary and ventures into the extraordinary. Now imagine a study designed to explore this very concept, a scientific experiment known as the Ganzfeld Experiment. It's an investigation that seeks to peer into the depths of human perception under conditions of controlled sensory deprivation. It's a fascinating endeavor that challenges our conventional understanding of how we perceive the world. What if we could tap into this unseen world of perception? Welcome to the exploration of the Ganzfeld Experiment. The Ganzfeld Experiment wasn't born from mere curiosity, it had a scientific foundation. Our story begins in the late 20th century, when parapsychologists were on a quest to explore the uncharted realms of human perception. These were scientists devoted to studying phenomena that seemed to defy commonplace scientific understanding. Their target? Extrasensory perception, or ESP, a supposed ability that allows information to be received outside the usual five senses. In this quest, a unique experiment was conceived, the Ganzfeld Experiment. The word Ganzfeld is derived from the German term for entire field. This experiment was designed to create a state of sensory deprivation, where the test subject's entire field of perception was filled with uniform, unstructured stimuli. But why sensory deprivation, you may ask? Well, this experiment was inspired by an evolutionary theory known as the signal detection theory. According to this theory, in a state of sensory deprivation, the brain starts detecting signals that are usually drowned out by the noise of everyday sensory input. In other words, when the usual chatter of the senses is silenced, the brain may start picking up on subtler signals. If ESP existed, the theory proposed, it could be detected in such a state. The purpose of the Ganzfeld experiment was to provide a controlled environment for testing this theory. The test subjects would be placed in a state of sensory deprivation. Then, a sender would attempt to telepathically transmit an image or thought to the receiver. If the receiver could accurately describe the transmitted image or thought, it could be evidence of ESP. From inception to execution, the Ganzfeld experiment was underpinned by rigorous scientific principles. It was a bold and meticulous attempt to study a phenomenon that had, until then, been relegated to the realms of pseudoscience and the paranormal. This experiment was designed to test the boundaries of human perception, and it did just that. So, what exactly happened during the Ganzfeld experiment? Let's take a closer look. The Ganzfeld experiment was a carefully orchestrated dance of the senses, delicately balanced between sensory deprivation and heightened perception. The experiment was divided into two key roles, the receiver and the sender. The receiver was placed in a state of sensory deprivation, their eyes covered with halved ping-pong balls and their ears filled with the continuous, monotonous drone of white noise. This was done to eliminate any interference from external stimuli, creating a blank canvas for the mind to project upon. Meanwhile, the sender was situated in a separate room. Their task was to transmit an image or video clip mentally to the receiver. The sender was shown a random image or video clip and was asked to concentrate on it, to visualize it in their mind's eye, and to project it telepathically to the receiver. The receiver, in their state of sensory deprivation, was then asked to verbalize any images or thoughts that came to mind. These verbalizations were recorded and later matched against the image or video clip that the sender was focusing on. The experiment was repeated multiple times with different pairs of senders and receivers. The aim was to see if the receivers could accurately perceive the images or video clips that the senders were trying to transmit. The Ganzfeld experiment was a deep dive into the uncharted waters of the human mind. It explored the possibility of telepathic communication, testing the boundaries of what we believe to be possible. It was a bold and audacious experiment, pushing the envelope of scientific inquiry. The experiment was not without its critics, of course. Many in the scientific community questioned the validity of the results, citing potential flaws in the experimental design and the potential for bias. But despite these criticisms, the Ganzfeld experiment remains a fascinating exploration of the potential for extrasensory perception. The results of this experiment were nothing short of fascinating. The Ganzfeld experiment produced some intriguing results. But what do they mean? Well, in a nutshell, the experiment found that participants were able to identify the correct image or information significantly more often than would be expected by mere chance. This has been interpreted by some as evidence of extrasensory perception, or ESP. However, it's important to note that these results are not without controversy. Critics argue that the statistical significance of the results is not strong enough to definitively prove the existence of ESP. They suggest that other factors, such as subtle cues or biases in the experiment, could have influenced the results. Furthermore, the interpretation of the results is hotly debated. Some see it as proof of ESP, while others see it as a statistical anomaly or an artifact of the experimental design. Despite these controversies, one thing is clear. The Ganzfeld experiment stirs up a lot of interest and discussion. Whether you believe in ESP or not, the Ganzfeld experiment certainly gives us food for thought. The Ganzfeld experiment, a fascinating journey into the unknown realms of human perception. Let's jog our memory a bit, shall we? The Ganzfeld experiment, a compelling scientific investigation into the possibility of extrasensory perception and telepathy, sets itself apart by using controlled sensory deprivation conditions. Born out of the curiosity to explore the uncharted territories of human perception, it has stirred up a whirlwind of debates and discussions. The experiment's process is intriguing, to say the least. Participants are subjected to sensory deprivation, with half ping-pong balls over their eyes and white noise coursing through their ears. The purpose? To see if they can receive and interpret information without using their conventional senses. The results, however, have been a mixed bag. Some participants have reported experiences that suggest the presence of ESP, while others haven't. So the question remains, do we have extrasensory perception, or is it just a figment of our imagination? The Ganzfeld experiment leaves the door open for you to decide.